to go with the live demo side of things because I am more of a programmer than a public speaker, but they make me do a lot of public speaking. So today we're going to be talking about how you can auto-generate GraphQL APIs at lightning speed in this lightning talk. I'm going to be giving a speedy, quick demonstration. So before we begin, we do have this poll that they really want me to do. So please go ahead and head on over to minty.com. The question that we have for you, if you enter in this code, I'm curious to know who here is using GraphQL in production. And out of the people I can see, I bet everyone probably can raise their hand because it sounds like you guys are all building things for GraphQL in production. But I'd love to go ahead and get a couple people to vote on that. And I can see the results here. So it looks like we've got 2 people right now. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm using it in production. And then we don't have a whole lot of people here. So we're going to keep moving because I don't want to be sitting here on this poll for too long. But we did it. So let's go ahead and switch back to out of that, the 3 people I know aren't using Hasura, which is our next question, because if so, then okay, let me get into the actual talk. This is the part that I am good at. So my name is Tristen. I am a community engineering wizard here at Hasura. Recently, I was actually at a startup where I was the CTO. We did a lot of really nerdy stuff with not enough people. And in doing that, I kind of fell in love with Hasura as a product. And when my startup ran out of money, I begged them over email to please let me work for their company because I love their product and I love building things with it. And after like 3 months of just emailing like every month, like, hey, are you guys hiring yet? They let me in the door. And so today we're going to go ahead and jump right into a demo. That is all the slides that I've got for you guys. So I will say that I'm running this locally in Docker. This is our open source version that I'm running right now. So everything that you see me doing in this demo, you could do right now without even paying a cent. You could run it locally in Docker. There is a quick start, which I will go ahead and I will paste into the chat for anybody who's interested. It's like 3 commands. So if you wanted to give it a spin, you can do that. As you can see, we're at localhost 8080. That's where I like to call home. It's one of my favorite places to be. This is kind of what you would get started with the new Hasura project. And what I've got is I've got a Postgres database linked up. Hasura has historically been known to work very well with Postgres. So I'm just going to show you kind of how things work because once you see it, you'll be like, oh, I'm a developer. That's cool because it is cool. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to go into our data. We've got a completely blank database. I'm going to create a new table. This is a user table. We're going to say it's got a user ID. That user ID is a auto incrementing integer. It's also got, let's say, the name for the user. We'll also go ahead and add created at and updated at. I'm going to use these nice little nifty defaults here. We'll set the primary key as user ID. All this should look pretty familiar, right? This is just, SQL database stuff. So I just built an API. And that is what's so cool about that, because now I can go ahead and start writing my mutations. And I can say, let's say we want to insert a user. So I can say insert user 1. And I can go ahead and fill out. So my name is Tristen. So we'll go ahead and we will insert a user named Tristen. And as you can see, this is the same speed you're going to get behind a VPN because what it's actually doing is it's compiling this GraphQL down to SQL. So, oh, I can't do that one here. That's only for the explain, but I'll show that in a second. So the cool thing is I've also got the ability to query now for all of my users, right? So I could go ahead and ask it now, hey, tell me this user. Now, the really neat thing though is I get instant subscriptions with this. So I can just go ahead and run a subscription here. And what I'm going to do is in another tab, I'm going to duplicate this tab, open a new tab, and then off screen, I'm going to go ahead and insert another user. We'll just say like John. We'll just pick a name here. Okay. And as you can see, within 1 second, you now have that subscription pulling back that data. What's kind of neat too is you get updates as well. So I can say update user. And I could say update user by PK. What are my user IDs? Probably it's going to start with 1, right? Because I chose the auto incrementing integer, but let's just check there. Yep, that makes sense. So we'll go ahead and we'll say the PK columns. We do have transactions here, which is pretty neat. I can set my PK column as 1, and I could say I want to set the name to, we'll spell my name wrong. A lot of people spell it with an A, and it's actually Ian. Just in case you ever meet another Tristen, make sure to tell them like, hey, by the way, this one Tristen told me one time that you spelled my name wrong. But anyways, so as you can see here, I can go ahead and I can update the user, and boom, instantly it changes. And I can go ahead and now change it back to the correct spelling. What's really cool about this is that there's actually a lot of additional power going on under the hood, because I can go ahead and create a new table. We'll call it to do, right? We've all seen the to do database before. We'll say that it's got a to do ID, right? And it's cool because like I'm literally just sitting here filling out a couple forms and making APIs. And it's so fast. And we'll say it also has a user ID. That user ID will be an integer, and we'll say it also has, I don't know, content maybe. It'll be text, and we'll go ahead and add a foreign key. We'll reference the user table. We'll pull in that user ID, and we'll go ahead and set it up to cascade on updates and deletes. We'll save this. We will add the table, and then I can go in, and now let's go ahead and add a to do. So I can say insert to do, and we'll go ahead and say insert to do 1. We do have the mini endpoints for anything as well, which I think is pretty nifty. I just love this tool because it's so easy to use. So this is some content. And we're going to go ahead and the ID will get auto filled out, but we'll link this to my user, which is user 1. We will add the to do. Oh, hold on. Let me go ahead and tell it what I want it to return. And now if I go ahead and I go back to this subscription, I can now, I'll track those relationships. Because what's happening here is we're actually taking this entity graph and we're auto-generating these predicates across this entity graph, where not only can I get all of these relationships, and go ahead and grab my content, and now I can see all of my users and the content that they have on a subscription, but I can also go ahead and do filtering, where I could do any kind of complex filtering that I might want. Let me find that subscription. I could say where the user ID is greater than or is null, or hey, I could do regular expressions. I can do a whole lot of exciting things, and I've got ands, ors, and nots inside of all of those predicates. So this is kind of how you auto-generate that GraphQL on all of your APIs. It's really neat. So that's just kind of the start of what Hasura has as a tool. It's really great. I love pushing the open source version as well as our cloud version, because it is cool that all of this is just something you can run. You can also go ahead and create actions. In action, you can create the inputs and outputs types, right? If you're familiar with GraphQL, you've messed with this before, and you basically can just route it to your webhook. When we have our own format or templating language, where you can, just like with the other presentation we have with Squid, right? Where you can route forward your headers, and I could go ahead and I could forward my client headers, or even pull in things from the environment variables here. And then I can transform these requests and even add payload transformations, where I can use a custom template language to then pass that through to my existing APIs. So I can plug in existing APIs and even import an entire open API spec just instantly and have it expose as GraphQL. We also have remote schemas. You can pull in schemas. And then my favorite thing, and the thing I was hoping to get to today, was events, because there's a lot of really neat things that we do plugging into events, where you can plug into Postgres's underlying change data capture. And I can say on user create, and I can tell it to pass through all of this data, and again, call a webhook, right? So whenever the user's created, and it'll call my webhook, I can schedule crons here as well. And then perhaps one of the most powerful things is the permissions, which is the last thing I'll talk about today. So I can actually go ahead and inside one of these tables, I can add a new permissions layer. We're going through a lot of information very quickly, so hopefully people are keeping up. But I can add permissions, and I can say, for example, I want to allow users to only insert or here, we'll go to the to-do table. That'd be a better example. I only want to allow users to insert a to-do So I'll create a new role called user. This gets passed in through JWT authentication. So you'll set up the JWT custom claims, and you can set up to map with like Auth0 or Firebase or what have you, your own role, your own. You can bail out to. And I could set up a check and say, hey, I only want to allow this user to insert to-dos if the to-dos user ID is equal to that user's session ID, which gets pulled in from the session variables. And I'll only allow them to set it's role-based access control at a column-based level where I can say, hey, they can only do this or that or so on and so forth. And so it's really neat because all of these permissions checks, I can go ahead and we'll say, let's say we save those permissions. I can go to the API in the headers. I could add X Hasura user, I think it's user role. It might just be role. And I could say that is going to be user, and then, or no, it should just be X Hasura role. And as you can see, now, not only does all my permissions go away, you can see the only thing I'm allowed to do is insert a to-do. And if I try to insert a to-do where the user ID is not equal to my user ID, which in this case is 1, let's see, why is it yelling at me here? The to-do ID we don't need, the user ID. Oh, that's the variables. Oh, it's because it has to return effective rows. So I can go ahead and now insert with the user ID is 2. If I try and do this, it will tell me, hey, there's a check constraint, the permission has failed. But if I go ahead and change the ID to 1, it will go ahead and it will let me insert a new user ID. Oh, I'm not allowed to do subscriptions. So that makes sense there. Can go ahead now and see that I just added one. So yeah, that's basically the fastest feature overview I could give. It's pretty much a lot of what Hasura has to offer. Really cool stuff. I really love it just because I love to build things with it. So with that, I'll go ahead and open it up to questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
If you wanted to build arbitrary business logic, like
Mm-hmm.
how would you encode that? Like, let's say,
Yeah,
like,
so
yeah.
absolutely. So great question. And it's funny because what I'm showing right now is our V2. We have a new version that just came out that's called V3, or that's actually it's still an alpha. We're getting ready to release it that has a lot better of a user story for custom business logic. But for the V2 and the thing that I just demoed, it's those actions. Basically, you write whatever your so if we're being honest, most APIs, a lot of APIs or REST APIs that use something like Open API spec, right? So you kind of take your existing API, you can write it kind of however you want. Like for me, I was always building with Fast API because I'm a Python nerd. So like, but like I know people that have used it with like Spring Boot, there's Ruby people that have done their stuff. Like whatever you would want to build your backend services in, you can, and then you can route to those just like a cloud function, right? You just put in the endpoint URL and then you maybe set it up so that the input matches whatever the input of that API, the underlying API is, right? And then you might need to do a little bit of like formatting with that template language that I talked about, but then you can have it route to whatever your existing API is. But in the future, you'll be able to run that on our cloud with our latest version, all of the custom business logic. You'll just write functions and it'll get pulled in and it'll auto generate.
Am I understanding this right? Would it be like a two-tier thing where you have a front end API that manages the business logic, and then Hasura handles the interface to Postgres? Like you would.
So Hasura, so Postgres is what we started with right now. So the future of serve, you can connect to all different kinds of things. So we're working on Mongo connector. We've got a ClickHouse connector in the works. I've personally built the Terso connector, the DuckDB connector, and the Quadrant connector, which are all experimental right now. I've built those in TypeScript. All the repos are public and open. I can also link to those. But the goal is kind of the big idea of the future of what we're trying to do, it's called DDN. So you know how we have CDNs for like file data, right? Why don't we have that for all of our data? Like, why don't we just have a data delivery network where you can put all of your data on an edge, a global edge network, where even if you have a multi-master tiered architecture where you've got, one Postgres running here and another one on the other side of the world, and it's multi-master, so blah, 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 right? Even when you have that going, you're able to essentially serve that globally throughout a edge network that's going to route to whatever's closest to the user, right? And that's a big part of the cloud offering that we have, but then we also have a lot of self-hosting stuff as well, because we have a lot of enterprises that also have started to integrate. That kind of answers some of the questions, hopefully.
Yeah. I guess I'm still unsure like where exactly like I would write my business logic to
Where do
like
you normally write your business logic?
um so we have uh a GraphQL API that's powered by Nexus.js, and
Okay.
inside the resolvers for whatever, like that's where we
Yeah,
enforce.
yeah. So I guess the idea with a big part of Hasura is you don't have to write resolvers anymore. So the
Mm,
idea is you just write the code, and then so like you write your Next.js API, right? And then that Next.js API will have endpoints, right? And then you would just point it at one of those endpoints, and that would turn into now an action. So that now becomes a mutation on your graph. And you don't have to do anything else. You don't have to tell it, oh, I won't need this, like it will just route for you. And then with the new version, there is basically we have something that's kind of similar to like Vercel functions or so, where you can kind of just
mhm.
write code. And you'll just be able to write a function, and then it puts it on the graph. It has hot reload, a lot of really cool stuff. I'd love to do a longer version of this maybe in the future, and dive a little bit deeper. So,
Cool.
any other questions?
Tristan, a quick question. I mean, a lot of what you showed today was obviously going through the UI and doing configuration there. I haven't looked into this at all, but is there like configuration that can be done through Terraform or anything else like that, or is it largely still set up through the
So
UI?
it's a little bit tricky. The new version that we have coming out is designed to have a better CI/CD story. The CI/CD story on version 2 was not that it was bad. I mean, the product was such a great product, and it exploded. Like the growth was explosive, and so it was like. But with that said, we knew that we could do better, right? Like we just rebuilt the entire V3 engine in Rust. And so like we're going bold on this idea. The idea at the end of the day is basically to give you access to all your data sources and remove the n+1 join problem completely, because our execution engine can abstract that away and give you n+1 joins across different data sources. And so can you repeat that question though? Because I had a train of thought and then I lost it. Sorry, Colin.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. I was just wondering, like, in terms of, you're configuring permissions and, and setting a lot up through, clicks within the UI. I guess is there a way to do that more programmatically in a
So
way that
if
could
you
be
want,
reviewed
you
and
can
things
mess
like
with
that?
my open source library that I think got me my job. I'm gonna send a message into this thing. It's called Pysura. It was kind of designed to do exactly that.
Got it.
It's similar to InHost in a way, but it was before I knew that InHost was a thing. InHost is something that builds Sura in, but has something that includes kind of like Firestore. It has so like the idea behind this project was I wanted something that had file upload and management. I wanted something that had built-in user authentication. I wanted something that gave me my push notifications that Firebase gives you, right? Because my former role, we built an app that we shipped on 6 platforms in Flutter that we had Hasura as like our backend for, right? And so I built this tool that would kind of deploy a lot of it for me.
Okay,
But I
cool.
know that there's a lot of stuff coming down the pipeline. I don't know if there's any like Terraform stuff right now. We do have a story that allows you to apply metadata and like to do that incrementally, but a lot of it is like via command line stuff.
Got it.
Does
Okay, that
that
makes
answer your
sense.
question?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool, cool. Anybody else? Any other questions? Well, awesome, awesome. That's what I have for you guys today. I hope you all enjoyed. I hope I did well. Like I said, I'm totally new to this, so I hope I didn't, totally mess that up.